Hi there. Just doing a hopefully quick video on the hedgerow around Sudbury. Native plants, some are not so native, maybe invasive, but it's things that we actually have in our hedgerow. This is a case of the old adage that you can't see the forest for the trees. When you start learning to identify things in nature, that just looks like a sea of green. It all kind of blends together, splash of color here and there, but basically it's all green, right? It's the same thing with the trees in the background. Once you get to know your local species of tree, those are all poplar. That guy right there is actually ash. Okay, I'm gonna jump across the driveway. This is all tag alder in behind me. Tag alder indicates that area is a lot swampier than the former side of the driveway that we were just looking at. So your trees can kind of tell you a lot about what an area of land is like underneath the trees. Even if you're just out hiking through the bush, you'll know that, okay, that's all tag alder over there. That's going to be rough going because it's going to be all swampy at your feet versus higher ground that's dry. As far as the hedgerow goes, I'll try and break this down a little bit. It's going to be a quick one. I'm going to go into individual details on a lot of the plants. If there's interest, if you guys are interested. Probably the obvious one, those little yellow and white guys, those are ox-eyed daisies. Okay, you can see them fairly up close. They grow all along my driveway here. I'm on the driveway specifically because the driveway, the edge of the driveway, it is an edge of the woods as well as kind of waste area. It's fairly gravelly here, so this is the type of stuff you would find in a Sudbury hedgerow, or anywhere around Sudbury, as opposed to if you're reading in books about working with plants from the hedgerow. It tends to be very much focused on England and the surrounding area. So some of the obvious ones a lot of people know, that's goldenrod. Okay, you can work with it. I'm just looking around for stuff. This one, this purple flower, it is a climbing vine. You can see there it's all tangled up with everything around it. It is Jacob's ladder. It wants to basically choke out the other stuff that it's climbing up. That's kind of its method, the way it does its thing. The taller stuff in behind, this is raspberry, which is very common in our area. Raspberry is good for the berries, obviously, but it's also the leaves can be used as a tea. I'll go into more of that in a different video, but you can see the actual raspberries in there. Another one that's fairly common, these guys are wild strawberry with the 3 leaves like that. Looks like your standard strawberry plant. You can find the berries. I'm just looking for those as well. There's some. Oh, maybe that's raspberry. No, that's raspberry. I just saw the red really close to the ground. It's the other reason it's very important to do a positive ID on your stuff. And just as I showed you the purple flowers over here, are Jacob's ladder. Right beside it, there's more purple flowers, but those are clover. Okay, I'm gonna jump back across the driveway because there's completely different plants on this side of the driveway than on that side of the driveway, and actually even in the middle of the driveway. that stuff there looks like mugwort. It's actually ragweed. It's this guy here. We do have ferns, lots of ferns. Unfortunately, the majority of the ferns on my property are bracken ferns. They're not the ones that are good for eating fiddleheads off of. Fiddleheads generally come from ostrich ferns. These aren't really edible, but what you can do with bracken ferns is use them to dye wools and paper and stuff like that. It does have a natural dye, kind of anywhere from a green to a brown, depends on where in the life of the fern you pick it to use for that. This beautiful plant here is one of my favorites. It's very much a northern plant, common in Russia, Alaska, the Yukon. This is fireweed, that nice gorgeous flower. They are up right now. The leaves or the petals can be used to make jams and jellies and even just a fireweed syrup. The leaves can be used to make tea, and this is a good example, this one right here, of why you want to get to know your individual plants and a positive identification on an individual plant, because until these flowers are up, the only thing you've got to really identify the fireweed are these leaves. And you see that big white line down the middle? This plant right beside it doesn't have it. See, no white line, white line. And the thing is, these leaves are very similar, like long, slender leaves. So if you're out looking for fireweed going, hey, I found one that's got these long, slender leaves, you could be fooled. But if you know about that white line, you know what fireweed's supposed to look like. And even easier to get a positive ID is very early in the season. You'll see fireweed come up, just a little spindle like that, where some of the very first flowers of the season are coming up. And then you take a look and go, yep, okay, this one's got that white line, cool, it's fireweed. And you go from there, or you just wait until you've got a flower on the top. Anything that you're picking for your own use, sustainable harvesting. I just picked a bunch of this actually just yesterday. That's why I'm kind of hung up on the fireweed right now. What I did is I went into a patch like this where that's all fireweed in behind. Okay. But there was actually a big patch that had flowers. And then on the outskirts was actually smaller plants just starting with the flowers. The bees were buzzing in these big flowers. I left them alone completely. I didn't pick any of the leaves or the flowers where the bees were. I went to the outer perimeter and basically harvested a bunch of plants from kind of an area like this and kept the bulk of the more mature plants because those will go to seed and repopulate this particular patch. It wasn't this patch that I was harvesting from. It was a much bigger patch on a different part of the property. But that's, you know, you hear talk of sustainable harvesting practices. If you go somewhere and you see like one or two plants of a specific species and that's all you're seeing, don't harvest those one or two plants. Leave them for the next year. Maybe next year there will be a bunch because it'll produce seed. Okay. Just taking a look to see if there's anything else really interesting in this patch. Again, lots of green, but as I said, when you on closer inspection, you get so you know that wild strawberry. This and that dandelion. Lots of tall grasses. That's just a grass of some variety. And there's your oxeye daisies. And this one, oh, this is actually just kind of came into focus of the camera. Okay, this one does need a positive ID before you use it. This one's yarrow. So what I'm actually looking at, I know I'm saying this one, and there's a whole bunch of green in front of the camera. This one, the one right dead center in front of the camera. These pretty white flowers, okay. The very feathery leaves. This is yarrow. The reason you have to be careful about getting a positive ID, this thing is maybe 2.5 feet tall total, and that's about as tall as it'll get. Has these feathery leaves. You have to be careful because there is hemlock, which is very poisonous, looks very similar to this. The way you can tell when it's hemlock is the stem will actually have red blotches all down the stem. This doesn't have the red blotches, and the leaves on yarrow are very, like, almost feathery. The leaves on a hemlock look somewhat different. They're more of a, well, kind of like the, I don't know, kind of like the ragweed leaves. So it does look different. It's just that it does have that white top. The other one, when people see this white top, people think of wild carrot, or they'll think of giant hogweed. The thing is, giant hogweed gets massive. These guys, I'm actually pointing down because they're only maybe 2 feet tall, 2.5 feet tall. So as long as it's like below that and has that feathery leaf, that will be your yarrow. We've got a lot of this yellow flower here. There's buttercups, which aren't good for our livestock, but I know I just saw somewhere there's some. I'll come down here a piece. This is not a great example. That guy, St. John's wort. And the way you can tell, yeah, not a great example. I'll find a better example. I know it because I'm familiar with the flower. The big thing with the St. John's wort, the easy giveaway, and it kind of blends in with a lot of yellow flowers. So you have to kind of look around there some. So there's all that buttercup down below. Up here, we got some St. John's wort. This is a much better example. So there's that yellow flower again. Okay, there's another example of that yellow flower. Almost looks like little heart-shaped petals, but you see around it these guys, these little buds. And I'll find one here. If you can get kind of an immature bud and squish it. Oh, that one was still, no, not a great example. Actually, the more I'm looking at this, am I even on the right plant? Maybe not. I may have the wrong plant. You guys can laugh about that at me in the comments. Feel free. That might not be right. So that's an example of a case where I wouldn't use that because I can't make a positive ID. St. John's wort has similar flowers. What's making me think I've got the wrong plant is St. John's wort has leaves. That's what I was going to show you. That don't look like that. The leaves typically, I'm just looking, the leaves typically have little tiny pinholes all down the back of them, and that doesn't. So possibly not St. John's wort, and it possibly is that the flowers are right and I'm looking at a plant next to it thinking I've got a better example. I'll find some good St. John's wort and do a video on that. But that's the importance of making sure you've got the right plant and knowing enough identifying markers of a specific plant to be able to go, yep, this is definitely the plant that I think it is, before you go ahead and use it. The other good example is what I said earlier about ragweed. Looks like mugwort. I actually harvested some thinking it was mugwort, and then had to learn better of it because I'm not from here originally, and where I'm from we don't have the same plants as here, so I had to relearn kind of my plants as I went, and went, oh, we've got mugwort here. And then I found out, no, we don't. It was, well, we may, but what I had was ragweed. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, comments, anything like that, or if you have any specific local plants you want to know more about, let me know. I am planning on doing more videos like this, but shorter. This is kind of an introductory to the whole hedgerow, but I'll go into just in-depth into specific plants if there's interest. Okay, thanks for joining me. Bye.